Taking many vacations. I think it's so fine.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to City Conversations. I'm Michael Alexander, the Director of SFU City Conversations. We welcome you all to this conversation. How many people have not been to a city conversation before? A few of you. Okay, well, first of all, let me say that we are on unceded territory of Coast Salish nations, and we thank them for this courtesy. Here's the way City Conversations works. We do not have speakers, and we do not have an audience. Instead, we have presenters, and we have participants, and you are the participants. This time is primarily for your questions, your observations, your opinions. It's a conversation back and forth. It can be across, if you feel it's that another participant has said something that you want to reinforce or disagree with, you can make that point as well. First of all, I want to acknowledge Supervisor Adrian Carr, who is joining.
Council.
I could supervise if you like.
San Francisco.
And that's absolutely true. Are there any other elected officials in the room today? Yes, sir. You are?
Park Board Commissioner Casey Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. And I also want to acknowledge, and you'll understand now why I switched to my San Francisco roots, Mark Manis, who is in the back here, who came up from San Francisco last night to talk to a public gathering about the viaducts and San Francisco's experience in taking down its elevated freeways. So we welcome you, Clark. If you're tweeting, it's #CityCon. And today's conversation is on politics and planning. This is the second of 3 events. The first one was 2 days ago. It was by invitation. It was at City Hall. It was put on by UBC's School of Planning and City Planning, SCART, and the Vancouver City Planning Commission. That will be online shortly. This gathering today will also be online shortly as soon as we have the tape up. So if you do not wish to be photographed during the conversation, just raise your hand now so that so that the videographer knows not to point camera. Everybody's cool. Great. Today we're going to talk about politics and planning. What's the relationship between council and the city planning director, of whom we are about to get a new one because the old one is retiring? What's the relationship? Who makes what decisions? Who gives what advice? What do planners learn from council? What do councilors learn from planners? Those are some of the questions we want to explore today. And to do so, we have, we're very thankful to have 2 former councilors, Marguerite Ford Peter Ladner, in my view, the premier journalist in British Columbia, Francis Beale. Okay, so Margaret, you're going to start?
To start with, I think I'm here under false pretenses a bit because I didn't actually have to hire a planner. I was elected after the first team council, and they had everything in place to start with, so I've benefited from their wisdom and their choice of planner. The choice of planner really matters because the type of city, the planner decides to a large degree what kind of city. Planning is important because the design of cities decides to some degree the kind of people that live there. I always used to say, if Paris didn't have the boulevards, would Paris have a fashion industry? If you didn't have the boulevards to be seen and be seen, and Paris got a fashion industry, New York got a garment industry. Is that because the cities were different? One of the things that a director of planning is going to need to know is what makes cities, how planning affects the kind of city, how cities work. Lots of planners are good at how cities look, but how they work is to me very important. And in selecting a new planner, the council is going to have to choose a person who fits their ideas, and hopefully they have been able to express what those ideas are to the public, so the public knows what they're likely to be getting. And it's the job of the council to inform the public and bring them along if necessary. And if they don't bother to do that, there's going to be a lot of unhappiness and turmoil. And the mayor has to provide the leadership. It's rare that a council member has much interest or even knowledge of planning. Not everybody is a Walter Hardwick who did have. But in any case, the mayor has to provide the leadership. And it has to be a partnership with the new director of planning. I think that's very important. And the mayor and council have to articulate what it is they're trying to do. They have to make sure people understand, and it involves change from what people are used to. That takes quite a lot of time and really serious consultation, because people don't change their ideas very readily, and it's not true that they don't change their ideas at all. And a lot of people just say, oh, it's NIMBY, so that we won't pay any attention. But people are entitled to know what's going on. And the director of planning, of course, has to put that kind of change into context so that it's understandable, so it's actually workable, and so it does what is intended and not something different. A lot of it takes a lot of negotiation and public consultation. I think that's very important. And particularly, I do not think that having an open house with a bunch of nice posters does the job. It takes longer than that. And I think it's very important that council and that the planning department and the director of planning work together and do their own job. It's not up to the council members to do the planning, and it's not up to the director of planning to do the politics, which sometimes happens. So you have to be fairly clear in what it is you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. There are a lot of duties that the director of planning will have to have. I think nobody has mentioned metro planning recently, but that's a very important element, because if almost always when the region has been affected, there's been leadership from Vancouver. So both the mayor and the planning department have to be involved. Otherwise, we're going to get an awful lot of sprawl, which affects Vancouver without Vancouver being able to do anything about it. And to accomplish any of the planning objectives, it's up to council to have the proper legislative framework in place to do so that the planning department can do what they need to do. And the director of planning will have to have some, I guess you could say, autonomy And along those lines, I dug up a quote from Art Phillips' original inaugural address in 1973, and he says, "Department heads should be given more independence, and they should in turn assign more responsibility and authority to staff members throughout the civil service. I would like to see a general relaxation throughout the city staff where individual employees will feel freer to make judgments, offer suggestions, and bring about changes to the operations of City Hall." That's spoken by a man with confidence, because not all politicians will feel that way. And I think that's great. So if I were to hire the new director of planning, I would look for someone who is well-trained and has experience in the city, who is a good communicator, a good administrator to administrate his or her own department, good at public participation, understands planning principles well and can communicate them to the public and to council, and to do a little education of council members, which is usually needed. In other words, not be able to walk on water, but look as though he could.
Wonderful, thank you. Peter Adler, you are on.
Thanks, Marguerite. You mentioned Art Phillips' 1972, was it?
1973.
1973 inaugural address. If you really want to see the Margaret, a really outstanding mayor, read that document. It's unbelievable. He laid everything out that he was going to do in his term, who would do it, all the details, like a business
And
plan.
then he did it.
And he did it all.
And he was only there for 4 years.
It was
incredible.
quite remarkable how he transformed the city, starting with that plan, all thought out before he sat down in his first meeting. Well, I'm just going to throw a few kind of anecdotes out there. I'm not going to be quite as systematic as Marguerite, and no doubt Francis will be. I want to just make some notes here. I want to start with just my personal experience as a member of council during the hiring of Brent Todder, the previous planner, to Brian Jackson. And just to give an idea of the real politics of it, and I remember being called into the city manager's office one day, and we were told, we knew that planning, that Larry Beasley was leaving or had left, and we needed a new planner. And in-camera meeting, we were just told, we got somebody. We got this great guy, you're going to love him, and we don't really have anybody else. There's a few other people, but they weren't really. So it's basically a take it or leave it kind of thing. To this day, I don't know who made that choice, whether and how much the mayor was consulted. Probably had another meeting earlier than the one with the council, but we just really didn't have much say. I think Larry Beasley had a lot to do with it. I think that the city manager had a lot to do with it. And who knows who else. And then right after we approved the person, I started getting these phone calls. Do you know what you guys did? Do you know who this guy is? Do you know how hated he was in Calgary by all the development community? No, I didn't know that. And so I was calling Calgary, what's going on? And then I finally came to the conclusion that he was probably hated to the extent that he was because he stuck up for principles of city planning ahead of the interests of the developers who weren't used to that. So I took that as an okay sign. But there were almost emergency meetings at UDI about how do we get rid of this guy, how can we stop him from coming in here. So that's one of the realities of the city planner. I'm going to go just through a few things that the city planner has to deal with, the director of planning. And one is pressure from developers who provide financial pressure. They finance city politicians, basically, pretty much entirely. There is political pressure that they apply. They lobby heavily. They have people, some of them may even be in this room, who are expert at lobbying council behind the scenes. And they also have a kind of a compelling presence because they have expertise. They know what it costs to build these things. They know the reality of trying to do different things that the city might want done, but they know it can or cannot be done. City planner also has to deal with all the past plans, and I went through just a few. There are so many. And city plan was sort of the grandmother of them all from 1995, which was done, I think it was Gordon Campbell who originally said, let's get this thing going, get the citizens to come up with these ideas. I printed out a few of the highlights. It goes on for a few pages. But it was only supposed to work for 20 years, so it's gone. It's out of date, but it's still hovering in the background. Then there are all these neighborhood plans. There's the bird accommodation plan, there's the green roof plan, there's the laneway housing plan. It's a miracle that anybody could come to some sense with all this, sometimes overlapping and conflicting plans. The city planner has to work, also think about the city's revenues. The city has become increasingly dependent on community amenity contributions, development cost charges, to finance all kinds of infrastructure and things. And unfortunately, that is a factor in decision-making and planning. The planner has to protect the public interest, but the question becomes, which public? The ones who show up and make a noise at council meetings or at neighborhood participation meetings, or the ones who sign on to play speak and participate in online polling, the ones who have actually ideas that we're just, sorry, we're not going to listen to. I don't want that social housing in my neighborhood, I don't care what you say, and they can show up 90% at the public meeting and we just go ahead and say we're having it anyway, because it's a council policy. The person has to be good at listening and reaching out. As Marguerite said, a great communicator, being able to go to the neighborhoods, listen, explain, show how the ideas are going to fit into their neighborhood. Has to deal with the regional perspective, because we are part of a larger region, which forces us, or we've agreed, to take on so many people in the growth of the region, and there's no stopping those people coming here, so we have to somehow, the planner has to find a way to fit them into existing neighborhoods now. We can no longer fit them into industrial areas because they're kind of used up. On that note, I think the planner also has to be looking at the job space of the region and saying, we have to protect those industrial areas. There is no constituency for those industrial areas except a few business lobbyists, but they are vital to the health of the city. And we are constantly eroding them. Every time I see a new building go up in an industrial area, I go, there we go. The residential folks have had their way, and we've got one more car repair place or parking lot or bus depot has to be pushed out of town or to the edge of town to the detriment of the city. The planner has to be a bit of a dreamer and designer. Planners were credited with sort of the dream of the seawall that goes all around the waterfront of the city, which is one of the great triumphs of planning in the city. And they have to be consummate negotiators, and Marguerite talked about this. Because I see so many people here who know so much more about this than I do, I'm going to just close with this and just say a comment that somebody made about Larry Beasley, who was the consummate negotiator. And no matter whether he was negotiating with council to accept his ideas, or with the neighborhood, or with developers, it's been said that when Larry was negotiating with you, you felt like he was making love with you. And when he finished, you realized you'd been screwed. That's the mark of a great plan.
Okay, Francis Beulah, can you top that?
No, I really can't. But I will remind everyone that probably the person who's going to have one of the biggest says in choosing the new planner, we don't know who that is, because very likely the city manager will be chosen first. And we don't know who that is, and that person will have a big say in who the planner is, more than anyone else. So just, a reminder about that. And one of the things, obviously, a lot of what Peter and Marguerite said are sort of what I've seen firsthand. One of the things, though, just a little story that they didn't tell that I get over and over again with every planner, chief planner I've ever reported on, and we have lots of off-the-record talks. One of the parts of their job that a lot of people don't realize, and it's become apparent in some of the criticisms the last few years, but a huge part of their job is saying no to developers who come like, oh, I think I'll buy this industrial land, any chance of rezoning it? Oh, I think I'll buy this. And I've had them practically weeping on the phone to me saying, I feel like I can't get anything done. All I do is spend all day on the phone saying, no, you can't do that. Stop it. Because if the city appears to wobble in any way on some of those issues, it just creates massive land speculation. And it'll always be something different. One year for a couple of years, there was a run on hotels. Half the hotel owners in the city were phoning saying, how about if we converted to condos? And another year it'll be, industrial land, or it's always changing. As with any capitalist system, they're looking at where they can buy cheap and sell high and, make a profit. So developers are always looking at all of the possibilities in the city and then phoning up the planning department to say, well, how about if we did this? And I've heard people criticize the chief planner, and the planning department or council saying, oh, well, you approve everything that comes through, you're just patsies. They don't realize that what comes to council is what's already made it through quite a testing process in the planning department. Hopefully, if that goes awry. Anyway, I just wanted to remind people that there are 4 different masters that the head planner has to serve. One is the public, and there is not a unified public. There's a certain part of the public that is, if I don't get my own way on every issue, then you are a terrible, undemocratic person. And then there's a different public that is, just tell us what the rules of engagement are. Tell us what you're going to do with our input so that we know the limits of what we're able to, how we're able to modify things. And as Peter said, there is a public that doesn't come out to meetings. It doesn't scream and yell and doesn't wait around for 3 nights to present their opinions at public hearings. And it's very difficult to know what their true opinions are, and I know that the planning department has struggled with how do we really find out what the opinion is. They used to do surveys in the neighborhood, and then that got hijacked by very energetic resident groups who would make sure that their group got in the maximum number of surveys. So then it became unrepresentative. So the public, council, who want the head planner to achieve their objectives, and sometimes extremely aggressive agenda, but also don't want them to get council in trouble. So somehow they're supposed to push forward a really aggressive agenda, but somehow appease all the community groups who don't like it, and make sure that council never looks bad or comes across as not listening. Then you have the developers, and they're not a unified group. There's one, I've been talking to people saying I was, coming here to speak about this issue, and when I talk to people in the development community, I hear really different things. Like one group really wants a planner who will bring a sense of design back to the city. There's been a tremendous focus in the last few years on accommodating density, trying to achieve rental, all kinds of things, and there's a sense that design has completely gone by the boards, and I'm sure Frank will be happy to talk about that more. There's another group that just wants certainty on the money and the pro formas. If you're going to make us pay CACs, okay, fine, but can we not have like the 18-month negotiation back and forth where I have no idea what I'm going to pay, and I can't go on the basis of any previous deals because this one might be totally different. The smaller developers feel like they get totally ignored in the city because so much attention is paid to the big mega developments because those ones deliver, huge CAC dollars and so on. And then finally, there's another group that we don't think about, but that's the people inside City Hall, like the people who work in the planning department and the other departments. And if you have a planner who doesn't inspire confidence and agreement with inside City Hall, they can't take things very far. And there's a certain amount of disarray that clogs up the works. And I've certainly heard about that over the years. And oddly, I've never seen anyone who can do all of these, I have to say. There are some planners who their staff love them and the public hates them, or vice versa. So I think, just to finish up, I think some big issues that the new planner is going to have to address is, do we really need a comprehensive new city plan? Or do we just need someone who can articulate in a coherent way over and over again what is going on? Because sometimes there are actually very, well-articulated plans and objectives, but the public doesn't know about them, so they're surprised. Like, oh, how can you build, townhouses in the back of a heritage building? This is a violation of the neighborhood plan, and it's actually not. It's something that was written in a long time ago to try to preserve heritage. And I do think one of the challenges is going to be trying to figure out how you can communicate authentically with the public, but in a way that people don't feel like if I just yell the loudest, then I must be the person, our group is the one that should be listened to. And there needs to be, some new ways, some innovative ways tried of talking to people, trying to solicit the opinions of those who don't come out to meetings, and so on. And yeah, finally this person has to be a saint and also achieve world peace.
If anybody knows saints who can achieve world peace, please let council and the rest of the city know about it. Participants, now it's your turn. Okay? I only know how to count by 3, so I'm going to ask for hands and I'm going to give you numbers. And then I'll call on you by number and we'll do it three at a time. And then we'll do another set of 3. Please, when you speak, if you aren't too shy about it, I know this is Canada, but give us your full name before you ask your question or make your observation. And I forgot to say earlier, but any of you who brought your lunch, thank you very much. We encourage you to come, when you come to City Conversations, bring your lunch, eat it quietly, and enjoy. We know that people have limited time here. So with that, number 1, saw a hand up there. Number 2, number 3. Okay, heavy hitters.
My name is Bob Bransford. I think Frances had a really insightful comment when she said we don't know how many times the planners say no. And I think the measure of a really good planner is to be able to articulate in a reasoned way or a rationale for saying no. And I think the kind of planner that we need in Vancouver right now is someone who has a vision for what to say no to and a reason to say no. I think in the last few years we've been saying no to a lot of things as a reaction to what we're hearing from neighborhoods that have never had to experience change before. It was very easy for Larry Beasley and Ann McAfee because they were seeing a transformation of Vancouver at a time when we were developing brownfield sites and port-related sites at the edge of the city where there were no residential neighborhoods, or the downtown south area where most of the residences had long left those neighborhoods, and they were transforming areas that would bring people into the city when people wanted to see a rebirth of the city, and there was no one feeling threatened by that. We've run out of that kind of land now, and we've seen the continued same pace of growth, and we've experienced growth in waves in Vancouver since the 1880s, and those waves come every 15 or 20 years, and we're in another one now. And we need a planner that actually can articulate a vision, and it's not based on design, but it's based on how we manage growth. It's based on where we're going to put growth in the city, and be able to say no, because I don't think, honestly, you don't know how many times planners say no, even under the existing policies that we have, not changing policies, but Vancouver has a very unique system in that all of the planning decisions are discretionary, basically. There's many conditional uses in most of the zones, and there's a lot of discretion that's delegated. If you go to, for instance, Delta or Richmond and places like that, the council even is involved in approving development permits. It's not delegated to staff or to the development permit panel or something like that. So Vancouver is a unique situation. We need a planner who can say no and explain why they're saying no, and that will tell us what yes means.
Thank you. Number 2.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
My name is David Greig, and my question relates to the advice given to the Director of Planning. that director would receive advice from the Planning Commission and also from the Advisory Urban Design Panel. So on both of these significant influential bodies of advisory bodies, the terms of reference would need to be reviewed, in my opinion. The reason for that is in the Vancouver Planning Commission, there's not even a requirement for one single professional person to be on that panel. So I stand corrected, but none of them need be an architect, a planner, or an engineer. So with the advisory design panel, there's not even a planner on the panel. There's someone from the Urban Development Institute, architects, landscape architects, engineers, but not one professional planner. So my question back to any of you that may wish to comment is, do you think that the Director of Planning should review those terms of reference of those influential bodies, or that should be left to the Council?
Well, I could start and just question your basic premise that the planning director takes direction from those two bodies. I think the planning director is over the, what's the planning design, what's it called, the design?
Urban Design Panel?
Urban Design Panel. Doesn't the planning director sit on that panel?
No.
No,
Well, that's not the one, sorry.
no, that's the development permit board.
Thank you. Certainly the planning commission, I've been on the planning commission, was originally the planning body for the city before they had a planning department. But now, with all due respect to people, current president Paz on the planning commission, it's kind of a group of people looking for a purpose. I mean, they don't really have a legislative function, and they jump in as need be as they try to get ahead and around the planning processes in the city, but nobody has to listen to them.
They're advisory bodies.
Yeah.
And the City Planning Commission is expected to represent citizens, not planners. And they collect whatever information they can from anybody that's interested, really, and say, this is what we think as interested citizens. And the planning director isn't ordered to follow it. In fact, the advice is usually supposed to be the council. And it's not intended to be a professional body, and it certainly has no real authority over the director of planning.
Yeah, and in about all 20 years of covering council, I can't think of a single time when the planning commission has had any direct impact. I mean, maybe just because of the people who are on it and they're, Bob is.
I sat up.
Yeah, and the urban design panel, I don't think, there is, if the director or council wanted to, they could overrule the urban design panel, but I think there's a real reluctance to, so there's a bit of a moral authority there or something. Like, I can't think of a time when the director of planning or council approved a project until the urban design panel had approved it. Now, you know, there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about certain pressures that were brought to bear in certain projects, and we won't name them here, will we?
Not even one?
Okay, okay. But I think council and the director are very sensitive to, how bad it would look if they went against a vote in the negative at the urban design panel.
But the question is...
Should there be a planner on it?
No. Well, the main question is, should the Director of Planning review those terms of reference to affect a new
But I don't think
balance?
the director of planning has any authority to do that. It would have to be council.
My guess would be the director of planning's got enough people coming at him or her that adding one more would just be, if they can avoid it, that they probably want to.
Okay, number 3.
Back in the 50s, Roland wrote a book called Mythologies, which is the stories we tell ourselves.
It's on the desk of every planner.
Exactly.
At City Hall.
There's a mythology that's grown up in the city about the importance, role, and power of city planners, and I'd like to really seriously contest it. This is one of at least 3 full-bore sessions devoted to the search for a new planner. Planners have a role here like movie stars do in LA or philanthropists and bankers do in New York. And I do think we need to question this as part of this. To respect this process, we have to question it. I think we had one truly visionary planner in Ray Paxman. We had a superb communicator in Larry Beasley. We have a landscape now where I don't think, no matter what the CV, I don't think we have the kind of success equal to the expectations. I think we should be instead having a talk about how we've developed a city that has a developers party to the right and a developers party to the left. Why the city has, Francis and Jeff and a handful of others, but a very, very passive media environment where things go unquestioned. I've been in Toronto, Calgary, even Edmonton, and see more debate about decisions, etc. I think we're missing the boat. The search for the super planner is a fool's game. Now, having said that, my vote, Jennifer Keesmaat in Toronto is getting murdered from the mayor at one side and getting murdered by her own staff on the other. I think she'd be as close to perfection as I could propose. So that's
What is your answer?
True.
Yes,
Well,
you didn't give me the please.
Jennifer,
Is there a
that is great.
I mean, it's true that the planner has as much leeway as council and the city manager give that planner. And I know Larry used to get reined in from time to time. Can you just stop blabbing so much in public? Thank you very much. It does depend very much on the environment that they're working in. But I see the focus on the planner as part of the huge interest that Vancouver has in design and planning. This is the only city, I think, where you get 600 people out on a June evening to listen to Andrich Duaney talk about, the ecosystems of suburbanism versus urbanism. Like, I can't think of another city where that many people would show up. There's just a huge interest, and part of that is investing a bit too much magical power in the
Well, I guess my main point is that we should try to get the story right. In other words, question mythology. And, for example, Jim Shank's role in the development of Vancouver's Tower Podium pushed aside, and politicians and planners have taken credit for it. Well, I think history will tell the truth eventually, but I think we have bought into a mythology that is hard on the planners who to get that job.
I've actually read recently a completely revisionist thing that it was Richard Henriquez who's laid the groundwork for Jim Chang.
That's not
But
true.
that's.
It's actually been common.
Those three years that hard.
Numbers 4, 5, and 6, please. Oh, there they are, 4, 5, and 6.
Before you go on to me, please, following your initial outline, we have the name of number 3.
Trevor Boney, sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Trevor.
Thank you.
And Michael, Marguerite just had a good point.
Could you repeat your question?
You're talking about what things look like, not how they work. I mean, Vancouver works, and always have. What happens as we change it, somebody needs to know, and I think that a director of planning can. Certainly Ray understood how cities work, and that was a very important factor. I mean, Vancouver works. It may not always work. We've got 50% of the population living on the 30th story. Will we have the same city? We don't know. I certainly don't know. And the current council undoubtedly doesn't know, but we need to understand before we actually do it.
So,
Number 4?
Number 4?
Yeah. Frank
Yes.
Ducote, former
Your name?
designer, Frank Ducote, former designer of the city and also member of the planning commission at the time. Francis hit an interesting point, is there a need for a new city plan? City plan came along before we had regional context statements, and theoretically the regional context statements for all municipalities in the region say how much of the population, how much of the jobs you're going to take in your share of the larger region. Because city plan preceded the regional context statement, it seemed to be there was a real opportunity, had they been reversed, to say, okay, we have this growth potential here, jobs and units and people, but we don't know how to allocate those things. We're going to send planners forward in the neighborhoods and do a plan, and it'll be driven by capacity analysis, it'll be driven by vacant sites or whatever, underutilized sites. I did one in Oak Ridge Lane there back in the day, and Francis remembers that in the mid-90s. But we never said to a neighborhood, your share of the regional context to take X thousands of people in the city over the next 20 years is Y.
except Grandview Woodlands. They got the
I'm going to
number.
speak to that.
And maybe they were told that, I don't know. And question, if you were told that in Dunbar or the West Side or West Point or something, and it's based on the amenities capacity you might have, present and future transit, school seats, any number of factors you want to say into a capacity, they're not all the same. You don't get 1/20th of the growth, but you get your share of the growth, whatever that is, based on factors. We never told people that. And so they were able to say no to us because they didn't want to take.
You mean in the city plan or in the regional plan?
In the city plan process,
Right.
they were essentially able to say no. We want a hell of a lot of amenities, but we want nothing more than 4 stories. So I think that missing piece about your share, and then the question becomes how. You take it in townhouses, laneway houses, or whatever else. I don't know what the former councillors or Francis, you think about that.
I thought there were some numbers
which is sort of a
attached in
vision
city
for the whole
plans.
city, but not necessarily a city plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, that's a good point. And I think some of the angst about development in the region, yes, comes because we're going through a wave of growth mixed in with some other factors that make people anxious. But also I do think it's the regional growth strategy that had specific numbers and then allocated specific numbers to municipalities. Some of them argued for more. That has propelled some of the resistance. People sort of accepted growth when it was just happening, but suddenly when they feel like there's a quota, I feel like there's more resistance.
I would beg to differ with that, because I think you said earlier, just lay down the rules and we'll work within them. And I think if people knew this is what we have to do, very difficult discussion to have, because who decides which neighborhood gets what? They won't be the neighborhoods, because they get to decide how they fit them in. Or maybe they would have, but we'll take a lot
But
of.
we're not disagreeing, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
If it's inevitable, people will ultimately accept it. They may resist at the beginning, but people understand. I mean, all kinds of areas of Vancouver have now accepted lane houses. The first lane house created a riot. I mean, people didn't get the idea. They didn't think it was
And basement
important.
suites, it was the same thing.
When our council approved a small wedge of land in Point Greig, the land was strata, the houses were single family, and I voted for it. I got hell from the Northwest Point Greig Homeowners Association, because that wasn't pure RS1. It had to be, well, that wouldn't happen now. I mean, they've accepted basement suites and lane houses and.
But Frank's point about if we said Vancouver's, agreed that growth inevitably is going to bring this many people, here's Vancouver's part of it, and here's how we're going to allocate it in the neighborhoods, here's the rationale for how we're going to allocate it. And then it's going to be up to neighborhoods at different points to say how are we going to accommodate that. But yeah, only some neighborhoods have heard the magic number and others haven't.
But it takes time. People have to take time to adjust to the idea.
I just want to quote from city plan about on this thing. Even with growth, that's the acknowledgement we have to grow. Vancouver will keep much of what gives its neighborhoods their look and feel. Trees and greenery, heritage buildings, distinctive area identities, generally low-scale buildings outside the central area. So it's right, and it was constantly called up whenever we came to some project would come up in the neighborhood. Well, look, we already agreed on city plan, we're going to keep it the way it is. We'll give or take a few Granville Island type amenities.
Number 5, please.
Thank you. My name's Dorothy Barkley, and I'm the chair of the Grandview Woodlands Area Council. I sat on the Citizens Assembly, and I'm co-chair of the Coalition of Vancouver Neighborhoods. We've been focused on what's been going on for so long, and Francis, I disagree completely. Within the Citizens Assembly, everyone was crying out for context. How do we fit into the city? What are the other neighborhoods doing? What's the rationale for what needs to happen? We couldn't even get a number as to what the densification was. There was just this underlying theme that you needed to take densification, whatever that may be. Generally, it involved a lot of height. And with regards to UDP, I would urge that there should be someone, it could be an architect, it could be a landscape architect, whatever. There should always be someone from the neighborhood, because UDP, when they look at what's going on in these neighborhoods, It's an academic process that does not touch on them or their lives or their neighborhoods. I haven't seen it happen. So I would suggest that if I could ask for anything from the new city planner, we recognize there's a role for the development community, for the city and its goals, but the residents need to be consulted, and there needs to be a city plan, a comprehensive plan that explains why we need to take how much growth and how it's to be apportioned, and not to leave the residents out there just floundering.
This gets to Patrick Condon's point, that Vancouver is the only city in the region without an official community plan. And why is that? Are we that special and different that we can't come up with one? Everybody else has one. And then the rules are laid out, and we know that it'll be growth here and density here and so on. And we don't have all these developer-driven initiatives that throw all the kids into a tailspin, because where did this come from? Some development proposal dropped out of the sky or headed into the sky, and now we've all got to adapt to it.
Number 6, please. Who was number 6? Okay, we're going to call for a new number 6. Number 6.
Okay, great. Adrian Carr, City Councillor. And by the way, I was a graduate student of Walter Hardwick when he was a city councillor. And I heard endlessly from him complaints about staff, that this was a council with lots of vision and staff had too much power. So in this last election, I think that planning did become political. And what we heard from citizens is the concern that staff had too much power, council had too much power, developers had too much power, but the citizens didn't. So how would you, in thinking about a new planner, chief of planning for the city, how would you frame the need to focus on giving the people some piece of that power that they are obviously desiring? And how does the planner, chief of planning, actually balance that, the direction of the department, with the will of council on that issue?
With the will of council, or with
Yeah,
the will
with
of
it.
the people in the neighborhood?
No, I'm saying if they are appealing to the people, how do the planners deal with council and whatever council wants in terms of public participation?
If it's different from what
If it's
people
different
want.
from what the people want, or the people want, or the planner himself or herself.
There's no science to this. You've almost got to make it up for each project. You have different issues that arouse different parts of different neighborhoods and different levels of emotion.
But I think the thing is that you've got to be willing to hear from people. You've got to give them a chance. As a matter of fact, we mentioned Larry Beasley. Larry Beasley was a phenomenally good local area planner when he was young, just beginning. We had a huge committee in Middle Mountain that ranged from Grace McCarthy's constituency president to the local Marxist-Leninist candidate. And everybody came and everybody had a say, and it went on for ages. But in the end, it transformed that community. It really made a huge difference, but it took a long time. And it took Larry knowing how to keep these people going and to hear what they had to say. It went on for quite a while. I don't think you can hurry it if you're actually trying to hear what people say.
Perhaps they could go to Bransford Woodlands and the Citizens Assembly and say, what have we learned? Because that's been a very long, painful, and deeply thought out process. There must be some lessons out of that.
I mean, I have to say, my concern is, after covering more awful public hearings than I care to mention, more than you ever went to. No, just because he was only on for a certain number of years, I've been covering, not that he wasn't at all. But there are so many people in this city we do not hear from. So what does it mean when you say you're listening? Does it mean you listen to the people who come to council and start screaming? Or is it other people who maybe never come to council? You know, there were a lot of people who crapped all over the city's STIR rental program. Those buildings are now filled with very grateful people who get a chance to rent a new apartment instead of a basement suite, you know, near transit and so on. They never showed up at any meetings. They're just happy they have like there's so much rental now, or not so much, but you know, at least a little bit more rental available in Vancouver than used to be. So that is my concern about the whole public listening part. Who are you listening to?
Well, that actually raises a question that I've been asking for about a year now, which is, when we have public participation, the people who come are the people who are already here. Who speaks for the people who want to be here, but aren't here yet, and therefore don't have a voice?
Or even
because they can't afford the housing prices, and some Winnipegers.
Whether it's because they can't afford the housing price, or whether like with rental, the housing simply isn't available. Who speaks for them in these plans? Okay, I throw that out as a rhetorical question. Hands please for number 7. Big hand up there for number 7. 8.
And
sorry?
Andy's got his hand up, he's bashful.
Andy, 8, sorry. And number 9. Okay, number 7, please.
Okay,
and your
so
name?
first of all, on the rental, it would
Your
be
name,
nice that
please?
the city, when they're making
Your name,
decisions.
please?
Don Gardner.
Thank you.
When the city is making decisions, they actually have statistics and information in front of them. Over 35% of the condo buildings, stratas, are rental. They don't include that in stock. So they're giving away density, they're giving away all kinds of things to build rentals when they're already there. So, I mean, you gotta have the facts when you're making decisions. Second thing is, we went through, in the Mount Pleasant plan, we spent 5 years developing a Mount Pleasant plan. There was density that had to be taken. We looked at options. We got to a point where we were told the only way you can do it is put in towers. We went out, brought the community together, did a charrette, and proved that we could take all of the density without building anything over 4 stories. That was completely ignored by the city and by planning. So if you're going to get a new plan, you know, one of the frustrating things when you look at, Vancouver Sun had a big article on the current planner saying his city. It's not his city, it's our city. So we need a planner who's going to listen to the community.
So, just on that, I do agree about the Mount Pleasant plan. It's also one of the reasons that I'm not so crazy about developing a city plan. They spent 3 or 4 years developing the Mount Pleasant plan. And the very first building that was proposed, everyone started arguing and saying this isn't what the plan was about. So I'm not convinced that a plan is going to solve problems.
But one of the problems there is that, and I said it when the plan came out, basically it wasn't worth the paper it's written on. None of the community plans are, because the city has so many diverse policies that they can come along and say, oh, this is STIR 100. Oh, no, that plan doesn't apply here. We're going to put this spot rezoning in that spot and ignore the plan. And they've done that over and over again. So you need a city plan. You need to understand how it's going to work. You need to know what.
If a neighborhood plan you spent 3 years on didn't work, how is the city plan going to work?
The only reason it didn't work is because it came along and overrode the plan. They overrode the plan. If they had stuck by the plan, there wouldn't have been a problem.
Did council pass the plan, or was it?
Yes, and then they ignored it.
Isn't that
No,
what happened in
actually,
Grandview Woodlands, Dorothy?
Pardon me?
Isn't that what happened in Grandview Woodlands?
No, there's no
Not
plan
yet.
Well, that was,
They haven't
that was the
got-
making of the plan.
But
Anyway, the problem with the Mount Pleasant plan is, when it was passed, all the residents were like, yeah, this is great, we really like it. And then the minute the first building came along, people started to disagree about what actually the consensus had been. And I think there was legitimate confusion on the part of residents who said, wait a minute, yes, we said we'll take some density. We didn't say a 26-story tower at Kingsway and Broadway. Just on your rental point, though, I think you're, if I can respectfully say, I think you're a little bit wrong there. CMHC does now look at the rentals in condos. That is factored in when the city is looking at how much rental is available in the city.
Well, I've been at public hearings at the city, Sorry.
We'll talk about it later, yeah.
Sorry, number 8, please.
I guess that's me. I'm Eddie Yan. I'm an urban planner as well as a member of the City Planning Commission. I guess I'll leave it fairly simple, is that perhaps there's a line that the Titanic was built by professionals, the Ark was built by amateurs. So that I'm curious that in your in your discussion of who the next planner would be, that it's been, I think the general regional context plan comes into how and by 2040 Vancouver's supposed to grow by 120,000 people. That how would you see that 120,000 people who aren't here to show up to a public meeting, who aren't here to advocate, should be allocated?
You mean among the neighborhoods?
Yeah.
I want to go back to Patrick Condon. Didn't he work that all out for the whole region?
Yeah,
We
he
could
did.
put them all down these corridors and fit them all in. We don't have to have that many big towers or whatever it was.
Yeah,
There's one in
that's
the
if
city.
every single landowner on an arterial agrees to redevelop.
Ask Dunbar whether they're gonna put those.
Well, that's the next phase of the discussion, of course.
You know, like, it's just like people saying, oh, there's all this zone capacity in Vancouver, we don't need to rezone anything. Well, you don't have to be here very long to understand that no matter what the zoning is, not every owner is gonna build to the max. I could tear down my heritage house and build a duplex, I'm not gonna do it. So, you know, and many small owners on arterials are not interested in redeveloping for whatever reason.
A lot of them can be persuaded by developers if they have no other options.
Maybe we should start charging for people leaving buildings empty.
Yes.
Has anybody got an actual count of how many there are?
Empty
The
well.
last empty buildings, the last I heard was 14.
There's no data.
There's no data. Okay.
Anyway, but whoever it was who said it, someone was talking about if you're gonna allocate it, you can't just sort of go by the square kilometers or whatever. You have to look at the amenities in the area and allocate it that way, which, who was saying that? Was it you?
I think Frank said that.
Oh, Frank, yeah.
And what about listening to the communities? Maybe some say, yeah, we're happy with it, I want to age in place, I need it someplace nearby, and others say, no way, and maybe there could be some happy compromise. Maybe.
Yeah, like, it certainly can't be just by, you know, square kilometer or something like that.
I just want to throw another thing that hasn't been said yet about neighborhood participation and people speaking and citizens engagement. Now, more than half the people in the city do not have English as their first language. They are not comfortable talking at public meetings. Their voices are very hard to be heard, and somehow the new planner has to get them into the picture too.
Okay. On that note, we have to stop because it's 1:30. First of all, I want to thank our presenters, and we have some little gifts for you. Let's give them all a